Hey everybody, this is Dr. Keen. We're starting muscular system today. This is the first section, and we're going to start going over the different parts of the skeletal system and the physiology and the anatomy of it. We're going to start with the physiology, but first we're going to go over some components of it that you need to understand and kind of break down muscular system in general. Some of it's a little review of some of the tissues that we went over, but some new stuff. So the skeletal system, there's three types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. We talked about this when we talked about tissues. Remember, skeletal muscle makes you move. Cardiac muscle is only one place you find that, and that's in your heart. And then smooth muscle is found in your internal organs. So that's why it's also called your visceral muscle, because that's what visceral means, internal organs. So, similarities: all muscle cells are elongated, and when they're elongated, they become muscle fibers. It has the ability to shorten or contract. All muscles are able to do that, and they all contain one of the following prefixes: myo, mice, or sarco. All those things refer to the muscle itself. Skeletal muscle fibers, like I said earlier, that's what makes you move. And so skeletal muscle is called skeletal muscle because it's attached to bone or the skeleton. So, and it has to do that in order to create motion. Your skeleton, which we just got done talking about, it has a lot of life and a lot of function and a lot of things that it does to help your body function. But without the muscle, your skeleton would have no function. It needs that connection with the muscle to be able to control your body. So, skeletal muscle fibers, what they look like and how they work, they're kind of cigar shaped, so they kind of look like a long, skinny, thick little strip of tissue there. They are multinucleated. We talked about that when we talked about tissues. Skeletal muscle is a multinucleated and it has striations. Remember, we talked about that, how it has the stripes in it. And it's the largest of all the muscle tissues. This is the only muscle that is voluntary. Okay, this is the only one that you can tell what to do. You can command it and tell it, okay, I want to move my arm, and then it'll move your arm. So, and there's different levels of that control, and there's different levels of contraction. You can contract really fast, you can contract really slow, you can do gradual long contractions. So there's a lot of different aspects to that. So the skeletal muscle anatomy, if you break it down, it actually is not just one big tissue. It's a bunch of small cells that make tissues that make other tissues and make other tissues make other tissues. So there's actually a long breakdown of all the different parts. And we're going to go through all those different parts as we move forward in this chapter. So just some basic parts, though, we're going to look at here. Start paying attention to these names here, because this is consistent. You see this throughout the whole body. We saw it in the bone. We saw endosteum and periosteum. Remember that? Well, now we're seeing endomysium and perimysium. So that's just throwing in that muscle word instead of bone. But it's the same thing. You have endosteum is on the inside of the tissue of the muscle. So in here, if you're looking at this thing, this whole thing, which they have pulled out here, is called a fascicle. Okay, that whole thing, the fascicle, it has inside of it endomysium, which is holding all those little muscle fibers, which are these little guys, holding those all together. So those little muscle fibers are held together by endomysium, which is surrounded by perimysium, which makes the fascicle. So this whole thing it's surrounded by perimysium. All these muscle fibers are held together in here by endomysium. And that fascicle, like I said, is that whole bundle there, a bunch of muscle fibers. Epimysium is on the outside of the muscle. So that basically holds everything together. So it's holding all of these little bundles together. Functions of the tendons. Tendons is what connects muscles to bone, and that's what allows that movement to happen. So right here, this is a tendon right here. This is the humerus, and this is the ulna, and it's the radius right here. So you can see how this is the bicep muscle, and it's connected to the ulna right there, and it's connected to the humerus up here. So that's actually allowing for you to bend your elbow. So that's what's happening there. So it's attaching the muscle to the bone. It's allowing for durability and holding that tension there. And then it also conserves space because you have small sizes, and the more you can have a long tendon, the less space it'll take up, so the more muscles you can have in one place. So that's how tendons work. Shape of the skeletal muscle, kind of talked about this a little bit, but it's got that belly to it. That belly is made up of a bunch of fascicles, which break down into muscle fibers. So that's how you get that kind of spindled shape, because that's what those lines or those striations are, is a bunch of fascicles lined up next to each other. And then smooth muscle, this is a little bit different, and we talked about this when we talked about tissues. There is no striations in smooth muscle. Remember, they're spindle shaped. They look like little needles kind of, and they're all kind of lined up next to each other. This is involuntary. So you don't control this, and that's good. You don't want to have to control your internal organs. So those internal organs will just work automatically, like your stomach and urinary system and stuff. And that propels stuff through your system and works through a motion called peristalsis. And peristalsis is a wave-like motion that happens through your smooth muscle. So you have that spindle shape, and there's only one nucleus in these cells. So here's all the cells right here. When it's all, when you're looking at it from the long ways, so if you're looking straight down at it, that's what these cells around here are looking at. When you're looking at it from the side, it looks like this, that's spindle shaped, and it has that skinny style. So this contraction is slow and sustained, and that's that wave-like motion that occurs to make things move through your body and in your intestines and all kinds of organs. Cardiac muscle. The word cardiac means heart, so it's the only place it's found. That's where you find that type of muscle, and it is striated also, just like your skeletal muscle is. But this is also involuntary. Again, very important for this to be involuntary, because you don't want to be thinking about every heartbeat that you have. And the main thing that kind of sets this aside and is kind of like a key term for you to see when you're looking for the different types of muscle is intercalated discs. Remember, we talked about this in tissues. Intercalated discs is what sets cardiac muscle aside, and that's this separation right here where it breaks up into different spindles like that. The anatomy of cardiac muscle. Cool thing about cardiac muscle is that the muscles in the heart are arranged in a figure 8 shape. And so when the heart beats, it actually wrings the heart out kind of. It kind of creates this like twisting motion of the heart, and that's what pumps the blood out of it and like basically squeezes the blood out of the heart. So that allows that pumping mechanism to get that blood out of the heart down into your body so your body can use it. And that contraction is caused because of electrical impulse that is created through nervous impulses caused by this whole sequence right here. It starts with the SA node or sinoatrial node, which is called the pacemaker of your heart, and that sends electrical impulses out to all these parts of the heart, including the AV node, which is the atrioventricular node. That sends that signal all the way down to the walls of your heart and the ventricles of your heart to create that pumping mechanism so that you can get that blood pumping out of your heart either to the lungs or to your body. So looking at the difference in the way it contracts and the different tissues and everything of the different muscles. So you should know this chart here. Skeletal, voluntary, slow and fast. You can have either one of those contractions in there, and it's not rhythmic, it's kind of like seismic. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about physiology. Cardiac, again, it's involuntary in the heart, and it's a slow contraction and nice and easy. It's controlled, and then smooth, involuntary, and then again very slow and smooth and functional. So what does a muscle do? It has a lot of different functions. It produces movement, it creates posture, it stabilizes your joints, generates heat. So first thing is producing movement, and we talked about this already. It's connected to bone. That shortening of the muscle causes the bones to move so that you can move your body and move from one place to the other, and allow for you to have that ability to move from one place to the other. But also in your smooth and cardiac muscle, it creates movement in there too, so that the things can flow through your organs, and then also your heart can pump blood into your body. Maintaining posture. There's muscles all up and down your back that their only function is to control your posture and keep you upright, whether you're sitting down, standing up, whatever. So you're under a force of gravity all the time, and in order to withstand that force, your muscles in your body will create a strength in your posture to establish resistance to that force. So stabilizing joints. We talked about ligaments a little bit already, and we've looked at the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle and all of that. So as those muscles and tendons and everything and ligaments wrap around those joints, it really holds those joints together and keeps that bone tight into the joint, like that humeral head in the glenoid fossa that we talked about. So, or the head of the femur in that acetabulum of the pelvis. Those are all things that are happening because of the tendons and the ligaments around it holding that tight into the joint. And the last thing is generating heat. You've all experienced this. When you get cold, your body shivers and your muscles tighten up, and you even sometimes want to like wrap your arms around yourself and kind of make that contraction happen, because that generates heat. When you create a muscle contraction, ATP is released and you use energy, which creates heat. So that heat is what helps us be able to regulate our body temperature. If we're too hot, we sweat. If we're too cold, we shiver to generate body temperature, and our body can determine that just by using our brain power. We have a natural thermostat in our brain that tells our body what the temperature is, and then that's what determines what kind of function and response is going to happen. So muscular system applies specifically to skeletal muscle when you're talking about muscular system. So we're going to be concentrating mostly on skeletal muscle. We'll talk about the others as well, but we're going to talk about mostly skeletal muscle, especially when we talk about the physiology of the muscle, and we're going to get into that in the next section of this unit.